Red Sox fall on Marathon Monday, but it was Bello's season debut.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to welcome you back into the Locked On Red Sox podcast, and thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. I'm your host, Jake Ignaszewski, and as I mentioned in our last episode, Lauren's currently on vacation, so I'm going to have tons of great guests throughout these next few weeks, and the guest today is Gone Bridge co-host Andrew Gardner. So, Andrew, it was Marathon Monday, Bello's season debut. First of all, how did you enjoy all the different festivities throughout this past weekend, with the 2013 team coming back and everything that went on during the 10-year anniversary?
First off, happy to be on the show. Appreciate the invite. But yeah, I mean, let's be honest. This is one of the best weekends of the year, especially in the first half of the season for any person in Boston. Marathon Monday. I mean, weather today, not great. But the Red Sox take 3 or 4 from the Angels. I don't think you can complain about that. I was at the game, yesterday on Sunday, which I guess was it was the quickest game of the season, like for any team. It felt like I was there for, half a minute. Like the pitch clock is making such a difference. But yeah, yesterday was great. I mean, again, it's still cold, but just being back at Fenway is so great. I ran into the 2013 team, like at least half the team when I was walking to my seat up top,
cool.
which was super cool. Like a bunch of guys who I'd forgotten about. Like I turned the corner, I see like Craig Breslow, Franklin Morales. I was like, man, this is sweet. But yeah, marathon today. I mean, not the result you're looking for. I think definitely a few positives to take away from things. Yeah, Bello struggled first start of the year. I mean, especially with the rain delay, 11 o'clock start. You got to think that messes with his schedule, his routine a little bit. So,
right.
He really just had a bad first inning. I wouldn't put too much heat on it. But I think after the series with the Rays, if you had said Red Sox take 3 or 4 with the Angels, have a chance to walk it off in the 9th in Game 4, I think most fans are signing up for that. So, it's a good weekend.
And, I talked about this yesterday, but last week, Lauren and I had a lot of semi-negative thoughts each and every single episode throughout last week, and I said each episode, we're gonna try to stay positive, we're gonna do our best, and luckily in last episode that I recorded yesterday talking about 3 wins in a row, it was probably the most positive I've been in a little bit about this team, and it was nice to talk about good things regarding the team, and also semi-reminiscing on the 2013 team. And I watched the reunion yesterday as well. I watched the live stream that they did, and I can't believe Franklin Morales, like Mike Karp, like different guys that I Ryan LaVarnway, guys that I completely forgot were on the 2013 team, showed up. It was cool to see those guys back.
Yeah, I mean the 2013 team as a whole, and what they did for the city cannot be duplicated, I don't think, ever. I mean, it was such an incredible team for them after, everything that happened in 2012 with just a complete disaster.
Right.
They, right the ship, win the World Series. Everyone picked them to be last, but there were a lot of guys on that team who you look back on and you're like, a lot of guys you can pick out that 2013 was their career year. And again, you just can't duplicate that team. They kept the majority of that team together for 2014. They were not good. People saw that, and then they, made moves and blew things up and traded, half the team. But I've kind of been not really from what the team did on the field, but especially kind of coming into the season. This 2023 team reminds me a little bit of the 2013 team, just with not a ton of big stars. Really, Devers is the only guy is like Poppy on that team. I mean, I know they had Pedroia and Lester a little bit bigger, but just a different team, something to prove, kind of underdog status, and 8-9 through their first 17 games. I know that 2013 team got off to a hot start, but kind of in terms of some of the characters on the team too, with Turner, Duvall, or not really Duvall, but Kike, Yoshida. I think a lot of people reminds me a little bit of them. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to go out and win the World Series, but I think looking back on it 10 years, one of the more similar teams to that 2013 club.
And one thing that was talked a lot about, especially from our mutual friend Jared Garabas, is the vibes. That was the one thing that a lot of people wanted to focus on, and especially down in spring training, all the different personalities, and trying to use that energy to help fans get excited about the team with the limited big splash moves that they made. Obviously X leaving and everything like that. But one thing that I've noticed so far throughout this season is we haven't really felt that energy yet. Like in this series was sort of like the first little glimpse where we started to see some excitement from the team. And I mentioned this last week. Like hopefully when they see the 2013 team, get honored, and there's those feels from Marathon Monday, the team will fully understand like what they're representing, like in the city that they're playing for, and that will maybe bring out a little bit more of like the energy and the swagger, because that was the one thing that I was yearning for in last year's team. You didn't really see any of that. And, when you think back to some of the best moments, like Cordero's grand slam, Travis Shaw's grand slam, like there's no like real, like defining, swagger or like high energy moment that you can really pinpoint. And so it was nice to see, at least during this Angels series, we started to finally see sort of those vibes, feelings throughout this team.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because like with my show Gone Bridge, like we do end of the season or kind of end of the year awards show. And so one of the awards we do moment of the year. And 2021 we had so many to pick from, and it was almost like tough to narrow down 5 where people could vote on. This year, I remember I was sitting in the airport down in Florida making this list, and I was having to scroll through like lists online to find top moments from the year, because I was like, I cannot think of anything. And yeah, that Franchi home run was really one of the only moments that stood out. And yeah, I agree. Like maybe, off the start of the year, it's been a little bit boring. I think this team is going to figure itself out. And again, I think one of the things that I've been high on is just, how important it is for this team to stay healthy. And they've been decimated by injuries once again. I mean, Adam Duvall had the best start of any player in the league the first 2 weeks of the season, gets hurt. He's out 6-8 weeks. So they've been killed by that. And I think honestly, with how much negative talk I see on Twitter and just talking with friends and stuff like that, for them to be 8-9 and had a chance to go over 500 today, I'm not saying like I'm happy with it, but I'll take it. Could definitely be worse.
Right.
Again, they won 78 games last year. I can't see them being worse than that. I just can't.
Well, it has been interesting too, because like a lot of people are pointing to the lack of depth, and it's nowhere close to as bad as it was last year. And I sort of said like last week, sort of in the shoes of Chaim Bloom, he's probably thinking like, this is what we were trying to avoid. We were trying to get as much depth as possible if there were injuries like this. And, now it's sort of unfolding. And, he's probably thinking to himself, I just can't win. I get like massive amounts of depth. You look at even like Worcester, like they have so many guys who are major league proven, have major league experience. Now they're not like high profile major league players down there, but their depth pieces like Alforo, like Greg Allen, Jake Faria, who just got designated for assignment after being called up. But you can only have so many quality depth pieces to fill in all these different injuries. And Chris Martin's another one that just went down. Obviously a big blow with that. Zach Kelly just put on the 60-day IL. It's just continuing to stack up, and you can only really do so much as a front office or as a general manager to really be able to fill in those holes effectively. And I'm curious to see if we potentially see a move outside of them just calling up and down different guys.
Yeah. I mean, there were more players, I think, last year than any team in Red Sox history to appear for the team. I mean, it seemed like, just so many guys like Yolmer Sanchez, Jalen Davis. I mean, so many guys who you're not going to remember in 2 years were on the Boston Red Sox.
21, Jack Lopez.
Taylor Motter. I mean, that was because of COVID at least.
Yeah.
The 2022 Red Sox, there were just a lot of random guys. And just what stinks with some of it is maybe it's it's short. We're barely into the season at this point, but
yeah,
you see a guy like Franchi Cordero, one of the depth pieces, leave the team, and he's lighting things up in New York right now. He's one of their I don't even know if he's starting every day, but it seems like I see him hit a home run every day. So I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes in for people. Is it's hard to stay tuned into every single game of the season. It's a long season, especially with the Celtics. I just saw that now they're the NBA, one of the top teams in the NBA. The Bruins just had the best season in NHL history. Boston's always going to love the Patriots. They're always going to be interested in them. So I think for someone who is not tuned into the Red Sox every single day, yeah, you might take a look at this roster and be like, why is Duran back up? Why is, where is, Paxton? Where is, player X? Why isn't Duvall playing? And I understand the frustration, but again, it's like just the injuries. You can't control them. And it's just been brutal for the team. And again, they'll bounce back. They'll get healthy, but they got to right the ship because there are a lot of good teams in the AL this year.
Right. And it's been interesting to hear some people and their reactions with, the lineup that's been put out recently. And, this needs to be way better. And, I'd be very curious to sort of see what some of these other teams' lineups would look like if they had the amount of injuries that the Red Sox had. Granted, even, you look at the rotation as well. We all know, pitching for the most part wins championships, and especially with the amount of injuries the Red Sox rotation had to begin the season. I'm just happy they have a record, as you mentioned, of 8-9 right now. You can just be happy about that. But you brought up Jaren Duran, and I want to talk a little bit more about him being caught up, as well as some of the other things that we saw going into Monday. But before we do that, I just want to talk to you about So Rare. Why did this ad not freaking load? Oh my God. I'm gonna cut that up. I'm gonna freaking read this ad. It didn't load. I had to do the refresh bullshit all over again. So Rare is our new sponsor, and it's a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace transforming fans into owners with the officially licensed digital cards featuring players from all across 30 MLB teams. It's unlike any other fantasy baseball platform, and it's truly a great one where you can collect, buy, sell, and compete with player cards against global opponents to win epic rewards. Win or lose, you still own your cards, and there's no cost to play. Plus, the more you win, the more you advance. So collecting increasingly powerful cards and assessing the next level of competitions and rewards. Another really cool thing as well is Julio Rodriguez and Juan Soto are brand ambassadors and will both be featured as So Rare's current brand campaigns, as well as will be engaging with the community throughout the season as well. So if you want to check out So Rare, go to sorare.com/logkedon. That's spelled SORARE.com to draft your team of free player cards, set your lineup, and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's sorare.com/lockedon to start playing today. And somebody else that just started playing today, specifically for the Boston Red Sox, is Jaren Duran, back up in the major leagues for, in my opinion, probably his last shot to show that he deserves to be on this Red Sox club and that he can be a productive major league player. But one thing, a lot of people sort of expected that this move could be coming with, obviously the Duvall injury, as well as all the different lefties coming. Most people mentioned, once the Red Sox get past all of these lefty pitchers, we'll probably see Jarren Duran get his last and final shot. But interestingly enough, in Worcester, he was batting 195. He went 8 for his 41 up at bats down with the WooSox, but he did have a lot better plate presence. Walked 10 times compared to 11 strikeouts, hit 2 home runs and 6 RBIs. And something that actually happened 2 days ago that sort of brought me back to the whole Tapia play was Duran ended up making a misplay in center field, and the WooSox I think they were winning like 5-4, and Duran wasn't able to track a ball, went right over his head, and ended up scoring 2 runs for the Columbus Clippers. And then he ultimately ended up being up that very next inning, ended up hitting a ball that, in most people's minds, at least when I saw it, I thought it was going to be a flyout. And Duran actually took his bat, slammed it on the ground, looking all pissed off, like he ended up just hitting a flyout. It was actually a game-tying home run, and it was just a crazy sort of turn of events. But I was really happy to see him get his third shot now at trying to show that he deserves to be on this major league club, but was able to hit a double in Monday's game.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is probably the last point where Duran, if he struggles again this year, maybe looking at a trade, maybe looking at a DFA, but we're a ways away from the end of the season or even that happening. But yeah, I think this is a huge opportunity for Duran to prove himself. I don't think that anybody, especially himself, thought that he was going to be getting an opportunity 2 weeks into April to be the starting center fielder for this team, basically. And you mentioned they get through the stretch of lefties, through the Tigers, through the Rays, and now through the Angels. He comes up for Bobby, and he's got a chance to prove himself, because let's be honest, Yoshida hasn't been playing all that great. Verdugo's been raking, but with Duvall out and Tapia, you're not going to get a ton out of him. He's got a chance to step up. I mean, Verdugo's looked comfortable in that leadoff spot, but again, Duran is your like prototypical top of the order guy. He's got the speed. He's shown he's got some pop, especially in the minors too, not so much at the major league level, but this is kind of the chance. Like, is Jaren Duran a quad A baseball player, or can he finally prove that, he deserves to be up here? And, again, I think if he plays well, you could see him replacing like Tapia as that fourth outfielder with the lefty at bat. So we'll see. I mean, I was very, very disappointed with him last year. He was I did not enjoy watching him, to be completely honest. But again, I'm optimistic that, he's got the tools to make it work. I know he's not like super, super young, but he could be a good piece for this team.
And I spoke with him going into this past season with the WooSox, and he really mentioned throughout the offseason, really tried to work on his mental game. Has been really reading a lot of different personal development books recently, which it was nice to hear. Him trying to grow in that aspect, because that's one thing we obviously saw last year in some of his comments off the field. That maturity's there, and you're 26, 27. You can't be acting like he did as a professional, and I hope, at least with this shot, maybe he's a little bit quieter in terms of, the media coverage, or maybe a little bit smarter and a little bit more professional the way he goes about things. And I think he definitely learned from last season. And, it was a little bit odd, sort of his last shot in the majors, ended up doing really well in the leadoff spot for like the first few weeks that we saw him. And then everything sort of went downhill, with the Tapia misplay that ended up being an inside the park grand slam, the Royals sort of whole situation where he's arguing with the fans. And, I'm curious to sort of see not only, how his new stance helps him really perform. Obviously, we saw that it really worked throughout spring training last year, but you brought up the leadoff aspect, and, Tapia ended up leading off in Monday's game, and Duran ended up batting ninth. And, you could obviously say one component of that is, he just played last night in Worcester, ended up, just getting the call up this morning. So probably, they didn't want to rush him too much in to major league pitching. But I'm curious to sort of see where he does land in this Red Sox lineup, throughout, his stint in the majors, if they will generally put him in the 9 spot, or if, they want to try and see what he can do at the leadoff spot, as well as, is center field the only place that you're going to keep him? Because, he played really well in left field throughout spring training. Who knows what he's able to do in right, but center field just doesn't seem to be the place for him.
Yeah, I mean, you can move him around. I mean, he shouldn't really like have a say in things if he's the minor league guy and trying out for a position. Throw him around, see where he plays the best. We've even seen that with Verdugo the last 2 years. He played the first half of the season last year in left field. He's been playing right field really ever since. And again, like Yoshida's had the hamstring injury. He's been DHing a little bit. There's a lot of flexibility with this lineup, I will say, when people are healthy. You can move guys around. Kike hasn't looked too comfortable at shortstop. So, again, you can move him to center, move Duran to left. Again, there's a lot of places you can move different players. It's just who's going to hit. That's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And, I am curious to see how he really approaches this shot at the plate, because he did struggle a little bit at the plate down in Worcester. And, I saw him chase, at some questionable pitches here or there. And, he did a little bit in today's game, striking out twice. But I hope he does use that better plate presence, like we saw a tiny bit with some of those walks when he was with the WooSox. But at the same time, this is his shot to truly show that he has a future with the Red Sox. And, I hope he fully takes advantage of it. But, it was nice to sort of see another Red Sox starter make his season debut on the mound in Brayan Bello. Didn't exactly start exactly how most fans wanted it to. He ended up striking out The Angels rookie shortstop to begin the inning. Then Ohtani ended up, singling. Ward ended up getting hit by a pitch, and then Renfroe, old friend of the Sox, ended up hitting a 3-run home run over the monster. But it was sort of tough to see some of those command issues early on for Bello, and you could see that he was definitely frustrated with how it went.
Yeah, I mean, not the type of start Bello wanted, and it is what it is. Again, like I think today you attribute it to a guy who 11 o'clock is your starting time. You get that pushed back by an hour. I know he got taken out after the second rain delay, but he's had to, rehab. And again, he didn't pitch, well today. But after that first inning, it was better. And I think if you look at last year, he really struggled in his first 3 starts. After that, I think it was 11 starts. 8 of his last 8 starts, he only gave up more than 3 runs once in those last 8 starts. And I had a couple people texting me today, like, "Oh, Bello's back. He stinks, blah, 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 blah. Why can't the Red Sox develop pitching?" Which, yeah, I don't disagree with that. We really haven't seen good prospects the last couple of years. I think it's the complete opposite with Bello, and I think that is such a lazy take if you think Brayan Bello is, if he's, already done at this point. The kid had 1 bad inning today, so be it. He was, he shoved at the end of last season. He was great. He's got good stuff. I mean, I think, you reevaluate it at the beginning of the season or at the middle of the season, but I'm not too worried about him, really. I think it's just weather, timing, first start of the year is what it is.
And I think as well, he did have some game action, throughout, some spring training stimulated games, and then he had that start with Worcester. But other than that, he hasn't really had a lot of game action, and there was a few pitches there where it was right on the corner of being a strike or a ball. And obviously, when we're talking about Brayan Bello making his 5th start, he's going to get those for strikes. It's all about just getting those reps. You can have those, bullpen sessions where you're throwing to a catcher, but when you're under those bright lights in MLB action, it's a lot different. And I also saw a few other people, alluding to how his command was sort of an issue when he made his Worcester rehab start. It wasn't. He had 0 walks over 6 strikeouts, only allowed 4 hits, allowed 1 earned run. One of them was a home run. So he has struggled a little bit allowing some of those home runs. Obviously, we saw that with Whitlock when he came back in his first start as well. But he also struck out 4 in that WooSox outing. And so I think it's something where I like how you brought up how he struggled, when he first came up, really just being thrown right into the rotation when he wasn't ready, and then really coming into his own, after coming back from that slight injury last season, and then shoving throughout the rest of the year. So I'm excited to see, what he's able to bring in his second start. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's very similar to what we saw with Garrett Whitlock. Maybe not going fully 7 innings like Whitlock did, but you're going to hopefully see a little bit of a bounce back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to remember, again, this kid made his 12th MLB start today. That is a lot of pitchers in a season. If they stay healthy, they're making their 12th start at the end of May. So you're looking at a guy who has, in his career, in terms of starts, pitched basically a third of an MLB season. He's still young. He's still a top prospect. Again, I just think, Marathon Monday, you're going against Ohtani, a lot of pressure. He's a kid. I mean, he's hardly older than us. If I'm out there, I want to make a great first impression. He's probably pushing a little bit too much again. Like I'm not trying to read too much into this start. I think it's a whole combination of things. And again, you mentioned Whitlock. He struggled in his first start down in Tampa. Pitches yesterday, absolutely shoved against the Angels. Best start turned in by any starter this year. So again, I'm not worried about it. I'll get back out there. I guess in 6 days with the 6-man rotation now, and get back at it.
And you brought up that 6-man rotation, and one guy who you could really make a 7-man rotation with Cutter Crawford in there. I mean, what he was able to do out of relief, going 6 1/3, only allowing 1 hit with 5 strikeouts against this Angels lineup after the game was resumed after the rain delay. It really shows there's no reason to send him down once again. He doesn't need any more work in AAA. Yes, he struggles a little bit when you put him in there as a starter. But I mean, if you have him and Winkowski as your long relievers, I don't think it gets any better than that.
No, not at all. And I will say for yesterday, I owe Ryan Brazier an apology. I was not expecting him to come out and close that game the way he did. But in general, there's no reason Cutter Crawford should be sent down while Ryan Brazier is still on the team. Or I know Caleb Orr, again, He was the setup guy yesterday and shut things down. Cutter Crawford has earned a spot on this major league roster. He struggled in 2020. I think, it was either 2020 or 2021. I can't remember when he came out. And then the first half of last year, he struggled as well. But after the All-Star break or towards the end of the season, he was pretty good, especially, he made some starts. I remember on the 4th of July, he pitched really well. It came out and, again, was good in relief appearances. And his ERA is down to around 4.5 now after an absolute blowout outing in his first start of the season. So again, Crawford, Winkowski, great long relief options. And those are two guys too, where if guys get hurt in the rotation and they're pitching really well, throw them in. They both started, probably 10 games or so each last year. So you got to be happy with what you're seeing from them so far.
100%. And I said the same thing with Brazier in yesterday's episode. I sort of went on the fact because we've crapped on Brazier a lot on this podcast, and it's just from his performance. Nothing against the guy. It's just when you're not helping the Red Sox get W's, you shouldn't be on this team. But it was nice to sort of see him, especially over these last few outings. He's been really effective, and I sort of went at the message of, if you're going to help the Sox get W's, that's all I care about at the end of the day. So I'll respect you in that aspect. But, once you have another string of like 5 outings where, you're blowing things up and, it maybe, causes different losses or something like that, I'm going to take those flowers away and I'm going to be realistic and honest that, you're not performing too great right now. But, I think it's going to be very interesting once Paxton gets caught up, ultimately what happens, with this 6-man rotation. Brian O'Halloran obviously spoke about that. It's probably only going to be this one turn. But for you, I'm curious, is there anybody in your mind who you think is going to be the immediate odd man out? I already have a person in my mind, but I think it's the obvious person. But I'm curious what you think.
I don't know. Honestly, you run down the rotation. Kluber hasn't been good, but he's not really going anywhere. Sale, same thing. Like, those guys have been struggling. If those two guys again can kind of turn things around, I think things are better. Tanner Houck, for me, he's probably going to be the guy who goes to the pen, as much as he's a good pitcher anywhere. That's the thing. Like, I think he's probably going to be the guy who gets sent back there. I will say, though, Nick Pivetta could make for a sneaky setup guy, and I don't think they're going to do that. They're going to keep Pivetta in the rotation. I mean, he eats innings like it's no one's business. He made the most starts for the team last year, but I do think, I'm not looking too far ahead, but I do think if you get to the postseason and Pivetta's like your 5th starter, I think he could be like lethal out of the pen. But that's kind of a side point. I do think it's probably going to be Houck. I do think maybe and I'm curious to see what they do with Paxton. Like, does Paxton start out of the pen, get a few innings? I mean, he hasn't pitched significant innings in 3 or so years now. It's been a very long time. So we'll see. But again, depth, at least in the pitching side of things with starters, is very, very strong for the Red Sox. And those depth pieces who weren't fantastic for most of the year last year, like in Crawford, in Winkowski, they've been some of the best pitchers. Like, if you exclude that first Cutter Crawford start, 2 of the best pitchers on this team. So I think you've got to be really pleased with that, especially when like your big guns, if you want to call like Corey Kluber that, your big guns, Kluber and Sale, not performing, you got those guys who can kind of come in and shut things down.
I agree. And, Houck was the guy that I was referring to as, it's kind of the obvious answer. He's sort of the odd man out. And I wouldn't be surprised if, when Paxton does ultimately come back, you see some of these, games like you saw today where, Crawford sort of, pitched a bulk amount of innings. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw, Paxton in his first few starts go like 4 innings, and then we see, Crawford or Winkowski come out there for, 3 or so, just to bridge the gap, just to help him continue to, build up. Interestingly enough, Chris Henrik ended up speaking with Paxton about the possibility of him being slotted in the bullpen. And he sort of said that, he's never been talked about that before. So that sort of indicates it right there. Who knows exactly what the moving pieces will look like when he ultimately is placed into the rotation. But, Carabas also brought up the possibility of, if Sale makes, 3 or 4 bad starts like he has, like, do you just sort of bite the bullet and put him in the bullpen?
I guess you could. I mean,
it's just
I don't
so
really
much
know
money as a bullpen arm,
to be completely honest. It's just the control thing. I think it's another thing too, where It's been bad. I mean, if I'm not going to sugarcoat things, like it's been bad for him so far. But again, he's another guy who he pitched a little bit in 2021. He pitched 2 games last year, didn't pitch in 2022. So it's been basically 4 calendar or yeah, basically 4 calendar years since he's had a full season. So again, I'd let him kind of ease back into things a little bit more. I mean, he's a different pitcher than before all these surgeries. He's not going to come out and pump, 99, 100 like he was. And
Right.
for him to be successful, it's going to be 2 things. It's going to be the stuff, and it's going to be his location. And his location, at least, has not been good so far. A lot of walks. So yeah, I mean, I could see Sale being thrown in the bullpen, but in my eyes, if you're paying a guy, 22, $23 million, and he's got the pedigree, got the resume that Chris Sale does, I think you just got to keep him in the rotation.
Yeah, I think it's up at like 35 right
Yeah,
now.
I actually do wish it was that little. I think you're right.
But I mean, especially with that control, like I think I saw one of his sliders be right in the middle of the zone, and that was never like that when he was on his game. And I think especially if you start to see his stuff massively decrease and become ineffective once he gets to the second or third inning or so, and teams are just hitting the cover off of the baseball, maybe you start to think about maybe 1 or 2 innings here or there as a bullpen arm. Maybe that will help him be better served. But you never like to see a guy getting paid that much amount of money, going that little amount of innings. I mean, Edwin Diaz he was going to be getting paid $20 million to be a closer, but at the same time, like that's Edwin Diaz.
Yeah, I mean the same thing too, which you've got to think about is, I mean, obviously they're not going to come out and publicly say this, but I'm sure there's an inning limit on Chris Sale this year. So,
Yeah.
I mean, again, maybe once you get towards the All-Star break, if you want to, again, we talked about how many starters they have, or at least guys who can start games. If you want to throw them out of the bullpen, give him like, 2-3 innings a week and just kind of save that arm, because even in seasons when he was really, really good, you look back at 2017, I mean, up until August, like, I remember the betting odds. Like, I remember someone saying like the betting odds were like -500 Chris Sale, and he tailed off at the end of that year. 2018, like same thing. 2019, 2020, or 2019, he gets hurt at the end of the year. Like, even when he's been good, once it gets to late August, September, October, if the Red Sox make the playoffs, like you're seeing him start to fatigue, start to like not be as good as he was. And that, I think it was 2017 against the Astros in the playoffs. Like, he blew up against the Astros. So again, I think with a lot of like other guys, and Chris Sale is not the ace he used to be. There's not the pressure on him. I don't think it's a bad idea to just take it slow with him this year. Take it slow.
I think you brought up Pavetta as potentially a bullpen guy in the playoffs. I think you could also bring up Sale as a possibility of that. Even if you don't put him in the bullpen, during the regular season, you could potentially do that during the postseason, because we know how important good depth in bullpens and quality arms coming out of the pen is so important, can really change the game for any team throughout the playoffs. But really appreciate you coming on the podcast, Andrew. And for anybody who wants to stay tuned with everything that's happening with the Red Sox 5 days a week, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Red Sox on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And if people want to check out Gone Bridge, where can they check that stuff out?
Yeah, so you can find us on, I mean, basically anywhere: Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Podcast is called Gone Bridge. Just, me and 2 of my buddies, we met in college, just talking Sox, having a good time with it. We put out usually at least 1 episode a week. And then, same thing. Find us on, Instagram, Gone Bridge, Twitter. It's funny. I say this at the end of every show, and now I'm like struggling to remember it. Twitter at Gone Bridge, Instagram's Gone Bridge Podcast. And yeah.
Awesome. And as always, we thank everybody for making Locked On Red Sox their first listen of every single day. Now, every day is tomorrow on the show. We have a very special guest in Jake Yossi, the producer for the Carabas Pod, or AKA the Name Redacted podcast. So definitely make sure to tune into that episode. Also, make sure to follow Locked On Red Sox on Twitter. It's LO_Red Sox. Myself, it's at Jake Iggy. And also my co-host, Lauren, is 3 laws, Lauren with 4 R's. But we greatly appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll end this episode how we always end it. Keep the faith, stay positive, and let's go Sox.